if I tell you, Alina, this is important, what I'm telling you is that it's important to me.
Right.
It might not be important to you, right?
Right.
So unless I learn what's important to you first, and then kind of show you why what we're doing is actually fits what your picture is,
Mm-hmm.
like you have no reason to really care.
Have you noticed that hospital operations aren't exactly smooth? On today's episode of That's a Great Point, we have special guest Sam Khozin, and his mission is to transform the healthcare system. On today's episode, we cover things like softening the impact while delivering difficult information, the cost of mistakes in the modern healthcare system, the importance of listening in communication. We also have some bonus content after the show is over, so stick around after we say farewell. As always, if you find our content helpful, please share it with somebody you love. Thanks for playing along. Enjoy. Welcome to That's a Great Point, the attitude adjustment for your soul, where co-hosts Alina Doran, Michelle Albers, and Lee Smart discuss deep topics around a life well lived. Let's start the show.
Really
Sam,
good.
I have you taken care of, my friend. There's nothing you need to do other than just be yourself.
Cool. Okay.
And make sure that there's so much pressure on you to perform that you really shut down. And I want you to I'm going to squeeze you. All right. So to be prepared.
I'm ready to be squeezed.
So I have a question to start off with. Has anybody called you Sambo yet?
Actually, a couple of people, but it's been a while.
That's awesome.
Well, one of my friends in medical school, he called me that. This guy from Arkansas, he loved calling me Sambo. Yeah, I liked it.
Oh, it must be a Southern thing then.
Yeah, I honestly wish more people called me that, because that'd be awesome.
Consider it done. Consider it done. Oh my God. I feel compelled, first of all, to introduce you to everybody if you have not already met each other.
I don't think we've met yet. Yes.
Michelle, meet Sam.
Hi, Sambo. Hi, Sambo. Nice to meet you.
Meet Michelle.
Michelle, great to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Michelle, do you want to share a bit about what you're up to?
I am up to lifing. I'm an intuitive coach, a catalyst for healing, maybe a strategist for healing as well. I introduce people to their authentic self is kind of how I see it these days. It's usually deep dive healing, trauma work, shadow work, inner child work, that kind of stuff. So whole picture stuff. I'm in Minnesota. I love Thailand, Chiang Mai specifically. I love sailing. Life is good. How about you? I want to hear more about you.
Me, I've always been into technology, and when I was like 5-6 years old, I used to take apart all my electronic toys, and couldn't put them back together, but I could take them apart. And when I was in high school, I wanted to go into electronics engineering, but being in a Eastern European household, really, my whole family's in medicine, so my only choice was really to go into medicine. There was literally no other choice. So that to myself, well, medicine sounds really interesting, and also, it sounds a bit like engineering as well in terms of like you're dealing with really biological machines. So that I would see how it goes, and if I don't like it, I could always do something else. And if I do like it, then I just continue doing it. Fast forward to second year of residency, and seeing kind of how the whole, how everything works, how the whole mechanism works, I thought to myself, there's a lot of inefficiencies in the system, and just kind of the gears all seem to the machine has a lot of gears, and they all seem to be spinning or turning. They're just not doing so in concert. So some of them are kind of like being counterproductive. Some of them are just kind of free spinning without really doing anything. And I thought to myself, well, I want to really help change that rather than just be a kind of like a free spinning, gear myself. So I left the clinical side after 2 years of internal medicine residency and became an entrepreneur and made it my mission to help transform the healthcare system. So here we are 12, 13 years later, and I'm still trying to do that.
Nice.
Well, that's an answer.
I love that.
I hope that answers your question. I don't know if that's, a good answer.
That's a great answer.
That's
I'm like seeing all the gears spinning as you're saying it. It's like, yeah, it kind of matters if they're all connected or not, doesn't it?
And don't we all, in the end, want to be useful gears? Right?
Actually, that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah.
And Sam meet Lee. Lee meets Sam.
Lee, great to meet you.
Lee, your lighting is a touch dark.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with that. All the lights are on that are normally on. The camera's in the same way it's always been, and for some reason I'm dark today. So I think it's because I've been sitting out in the sun getting a tan, so it's rubbing off on the camera.
Okay. Tanning the camera too?
Yeah. So that's where we are. Man, I love the fact that you were into mechanical engineering. I'm a retired auto mechanic, ran my own mechanic shop for a while. And whenever a hurricane decided to drop that on the ground, because of how far I'd managed to come in my life because of a life coach, I decided to shift gears and become a professional life coach. So I've been doing that for 4 years now, up to this point. So that's me. I want to know more about you. I have this podcast all the time to talk about me. So,
well, what fascinates me, human behavior is all very interesting to me, and kind of Alina and I were talking, and it always fascinates me that the leaders we pick to run things and how we do so, and how we end up with a lot of like malignant narcissist leaders, and we don't, and as a whole, humans don't kind of realize that they're malignant narcissists and they're in it just for themselves, not for the people they're saying they're going to help. So I've been reading just kind of a lot about psychology and coaching books as well, and coaching courses, and I was hoping you guys had some insight on that as well. Why do we end up with leaders that suck?
Oh, what an amazing question. That's a fantastic question. And if everyone's okay, just to take a quick pause, which we don't usually do, I think it might be fun to share how we met, because there's a very relevant point here. Is that cool?
Please, yeah.
So Sam and I met last year at the Innovate Summit. So this is a summit in Owensboro, Kentucky that a friend of ours, Brian Wallace, is putting on. And it's amazing and thoughtful and soulful. And we're going to be both back there this year. And here's the thing. When I met Sam, the only thing I knew about Sam is the photographer. Sam had a camera, a big camera in his hands. He was standing, crouching, whatever position he needed to get in to get the best shot to record what was happening at Innovate Summit. He proceeded through the whole summit, the length of the multi-day summit, to take photographs of all the speakers, everything, all the goings on. It was like the last 20 minutes. I don't know if you remember, Sam, you had to like run and you're like, oh, I have to. It was like, let me do it. You gave me the camera and I was taking pictures for you. At the very end, at some point, maybe day 2, I learned that Sam he has like a medical doctor degree. He started a company where he's trying to create a better experience for, like, make sense of hospitals and create better experience for patients. Sam didn't, like, he was just incredibly humble, like no ego, just like doing whatever needed to be done, period, and nothing else. And you also have a master's in quantitative, right? Master in science and quantitative management. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, by the way, but none of that came out. None of that was said. It was just Sam's the dude who takes pictures. And in this world, the leaders that make it here, there's a variety, right? There's people like Sam who are incredibly intelligent, high integrity, humble, and they have the mission in mind and they want to lift others with them, that is longevity and loyalty, like lifetime. That's the leader that people will follow company to company, right? Well, they will care less about what kind of company, what product. They just want to work with the leader because they're incredible. And then, unfortunately, all too often, and that's what Sam is raising here, is there are leaders who are promoted and promoted and promoted with accolades and awards and recognitions, who are toxic and cruel and two-faced. And that's what you're talking about, right? When you suggested the topic of malignant narcissists, which kind of takes it the next level.
Yeah, that's thank you for all that. That's very kind.
Very true.
The malignant narcissist specifically, because narcissists themselves, well, it's like the non-malignant narcissists, like I guess benign ones, they're not necessarily doing all the harm that the malignant ones are doing, or at least in my understanding. And correct me if I'm wrong, because it's my understanding is very rudimentary in this stuff. But overall, just kind of like the people kind of fall for the charm, for the I've got all the answers, attitude, and I'm the only one who can answer these questions for you. I'm the only one who can solve this problem. Etc. Right? Because to me, the reason I'm actually even thinking about this is that my passion is healthcare, right? And in healthcare, how did we get to the point where we are now, where the cost, the lack of a quality experience, not necessarily having the best outcomes, and also having roughly 2 jumbo jets a day of deaths because of medical mistakes that are completely preventable. I mean, imagine 700 people dying a day because of accidents. So those kind of things, to me, are very preventable. And if we had the right leadership, that would help ease these problems or help them kind of go away, fix them. And how do we, get to this place where, because of the leadership, at least in part of the leadership that we've had, we've kind of gone downhill instead of made it worse, basically, or at least not that much better, versus like just completely transforming it.
The 2 jumbo jets a day worth of deaths is that's quite a visual, right? That's quite a representation. Terrifying because it is high stakes. Right. It is very high stakes. I was listening to your interview yesterday with a doctor that you were speaking to who treats folks in rural. You were talking about being a physician in the rural area. And he said, please correct me if I have it wrong. This is so powerful to your point. I would rather tell a patient that they have cancer than have to tell someone who works for me that it's not working out and I need to fire them. And not like that stopped me in my tracks, and I re-listened to it. That's shocking. That's like a mic drop.
So I want to address what you were talking about with a malignant narcissist. And you work in systems. You know how systems work, and our system as a society reinforces, right? So the behaviors are reinforced because most of what we value as a society, they can help a company get, right? Because many times being a malignant narcissist, then it allows you to take the compassion out of it and use people as units of production rather than trying to see them as people. And they get rewarded for it, because now all of a sudden the company, the people at the top who have zero connection to that compassion, have the opportunity to also be disconnected, and they have exactly what they want. So they get reinforced with their wallets, with their bank accounts. So it's a simplistic way to look at it. Obviously, there's more complexity to what I'm saying, but I'm curious, when you talk about the systems, and how are the systems today in today's modern healthcare system being reinforced to not deliver the results that we're looking for?
Yeah, so two things. So let me I'll address Alina's comment really quick as well. Yeah, it's very hard to. So imagine if for the doctor, it's very hard to deliver. It's so hard to deliver, like bad news to you or the person who works for you, that it's actually easier to deliver bad news to a patient rather than them. So, and if it's that hard for a doctor to do that, it's probably not easier for anyone else either. So, in terms of, it's really hard to deliver bad news to anyone who works with you or for you. Maybe that's one part of the problem where it might be hard for you, but at the same time, it might be benefiting your office. Let's say if you fire the person who doesn't fit in, it makes your office better. There are systems for that. I think like Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference teaches how to basically talk with people and do like deep listening and just active listening, and be able to say things in a way that doesn't rub people the wrong way. Like I could, if someone works for me, I could tell them they're fired without making them self-defensive or things like that. Just by saying things like, look, you're going to think I'm a huge jerk. You probably think I'm the worst person in the world for what I'm about to say. And then you can lay out the bad news and it's like, oh, well, that wasn't that bad. I mean, so like if you say you're fired after that, it's like, okay, well, I don't think you're the worst person in the world for saying that. So, but it kind of took the edge off of whatever I was going to say. So things like that, as our organization grows, I'm going to have everyone in our company learn those techniques and so on, because then it just makes communication so much easier. And Lee, I'm sorry, my ADHD is kicking in. Remind me what the question was.
Yeah, I was wondering how you see the systems reinforce themselves to not get the results that we're looking for from our systems in the healthcare industry.
The more I learn about how to make a difference, the more I learn about healthcare or really anything else, the more I realize that we've all been kind of failed by the society and education and so on, because these kind of things are what's worth teaching, and yet no one teaches us these things. Like, for example, I don't know if you can see this, but like there's a thing called theory of constraints. And this thing, theory of constraints was described in 1984 by a guy named Eli Goldratt. He's a physicist who went into like industry, and he helped corporations and factories and so on implement systems to essentially stop having to put out fires, almost in a very common sense way. It's kind of like the saying is, it might be common sense, it's just not common practice. But he'll help them streamline things in a way that, one, engage the employees, so everyone's more engaged and they feel a sense of autonomy, reward for seeing how kind of they're helping the overall picture kind of flourish. Essentially, all it is looking at bottlenecks. So like whatever your business is, there's a bottleneck, but it could be the amount of customers that are coming into your pipeline. It could be you're overwhelmed with customers and you don't have the capacity to deal with them all. But there's a bottleneck somewhere that determines the capacity, the throughput of the system. All it is just identifying that and then working to expand the bottleneck and increasing the throughput. So for our hospital, like hopefully you guys haven't dealt with hospitals very much, but I'm sure you've seen, people who, let's say, at least have. There's always waits, right? So like if you go to the ER, either there's a wait to see the doctor, there's a way to get a bed, there's a way to, if you're admitted, to go to to go to a room upstairs. If you're discharged, there's a way to be discharged. And yet, if you do things well, honestly, it could flow like oil. Like just, I imagine a well-functioning hospital, just kind of like, just everything kind of flows, and you just go from one place to the next place, very little wait between or at, right? Like there's no wait to get an X-ray. It's just like you go there, X-ray is done, you go out, and it's like a beautiful thing. But in healthcare, no one knows about this. And it's been, so these theories have been around since 1984. It's so sensical that when you look at healthcare the way it's done now, you're like, why isn't this kind of pervasive throughout the system? And it's really just because no one's heard about it. There's not enough staff, there's not enough nurses, there's not enough doctors. But by implementing this kind of thing, you can literally increase throughput by like 30% without decreasing or increasing staff. It's just doing with the resources you have. And the staff is happier, the patients are happier, the quality goes up, all that kind of stuff. So like and you continuously do it. The whole point of it is continuous improvement. It's not just like a one-time thing where you find a bottleneck, you can continuously iterate on it. The last step actually is don't let inertia be the bottleneck. It's probably kind of what you guys deal with all the time as well, in terms of helping people. It's always a continuous improvement thing, right? It's not like, okay, here, implement this one step, you're perfect, great, that's it, right? It takes like a lot of iterations and years of coaching to actually get the person to like kind of realize their best self. And they still can, there's no like end to it. You still have to continuously work on it. Same thing for hospitals. It's literally just, coaching as well.
Mm. Well, I'm hearing you talk about, right, the operational sort of fitting the gears closer together so it's more efficient, which creates, right, more efficiency financially. It's more sustainable. You don't have to hire as many people. Staff are not as overrun. They're less stressed. Patients are getting better service and care. But for all of that to happen, the folks that are making the decision have to be willing to do a number of things, right? They have to be willing to be flexible, to take input, to be open to adaptability and change, to see a problem to begin with, right? So it's like vision setting, it's being humble, which in the medical field might not be as easy. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. So for one of the things that Dr. Kloff and I talked about yesterday was, for example, at rural hospitals, they don't have, the CEOs there don't have the luxury of thinking too much. They don't have the time to think about strategy as much as we'd like them to, and long-term things. They're busy fighting fires and just taking care of the everyday stuff. No one wants to take risk, to put their jobs at risk, right? So let's say if, Michelle or Lee or Alina, like if someone said, "Hey, there's a better way for you to do things," and it's not going to, it really is very cheap. There's no added, like, it's just doing things differently. There's no like added, you don't have to like buy any new equipment or whatever else. You just have to do things in a different methodology. Your first response probably be like, "No, I'm okay, thank you. Like I have my stuff set. Like I've tried a lot of things before. Like everyone says it's different and so on. Like this works for me." And in healthcare, there's also basically just inertia, where the hardest part of it all is probably just the change management part, right? To actually get people to understand what the benefit to them is, and especially the executives. Again, they don't want to necessarily take another risk, even though by implementing this kind of stuff, they're actually taking less risks, making more money, and running a much better hospital or facility or organization. It's that initial kind of pushback that kind of thing stops things from moving. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm curious about. And we're talking about, narcissists. People go into this field to do good in the world, to heal. Where along the way, and you've been to so many different hospitals and institutions, like where do you see it getting broken down? Where does it all get misdirected?
And correct me if I'm wrong. You guys tell me, like, if your needs aren't taken care of, no matter how much you care about other people, you're like, okay, I'm not making enough money to pay my rent, or I'm not, I don't have time to spend with my kids, or whatever it is. You kind of have to start thinking about yourself more than others, because if you don't take care of yourself, like, or at least you have to be a little bit selfish, basically, to some degree, and in order to kind of protect yourself from being torn apart. That kind of done over many years kind of wears people down, makes them apathetic, it's like I've heard stories of, for example, if of a nurse walking into a room giving the patient medications, then another nurse walks in 2 minutes later to give the same medications. The person that's there with the patients like has to basically kind of be like, whoa, hold on, what is that? They just got medication, like their pain meds like 2 minutes ago, or their blood pressure medications 2 minutes ago. Had they not intervened, that person, the patient could have either suffered a lot of injury or death possibly. The nurse in that picture kind of just shrugs and like, oh, okay, my bad, and then walks out, and that's the last of it. So normally the reaction would be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, this never happens. But if they're so worn down, right, that they're multitasking so many things and just they're more is being asked of them than they can actually deliver. They don't have time for it to be empathetic or to feel guilt or whatever it is about the weight of what could have just happened. Burning out to me is kind of like when people have been mistreated for a long time and they start burning out, not because it feels almost like gaslighting. It's like when in medicine, what happens is when nurses or doctors or staff start getting burnt out, they're told that, hey, essentially kind of it's your problem, it's your fault that you're getting burnt out, versus like, hey, it's our fault for like overwhelming you with things to do or making or setting the conditions that result in burnout. I don't blame the people who are running the hospitals, executives, as much either, because I'm sure they have a lot of on their plate as well, and they're trying to do the best they can to run the hospital. They probably have unrealistic expectations that put placed on them by the board or whoever, and so it's kind of like this vicious cycle where everyone's kind of not functioning well, and instead of like pausing and just kind of restarting, they kind of just keep going and like just keep circling down that vicious cycle. If that answers your question.
Yeah, the word jaded comes to mind.
Yeah.
So what are you aiming for when you start to talk about the medical systems? Like, what would be your ideal result if you were to wave a magic wand and everything were to be better?
So we're all patients, whether we want to be or not. At some point in our lives, we're all patients, right? And so my vision for it is simply, no matter where I go in the country, what hospital or what doctor I go to, I don't have to worry about what kind of care I'm going to receive, whether I'm going to get injured at the hospital, or if I'm going to, have a medical mistake that creates an adverse effect for me or adverse outcome. Like, I want to rest easy knowing wherever I am, that I'll receive the best damn care possible, have the best experience possible, and at a reasonable cost, or let's say the lowest cost possible. It's not rocket science to think that way. My business partners and I have the tools to do it. I've been fortunate enough to meet people who've been thinking about this as for many years, like me, and have created software and so on to kind of help do that. It's very possible. Could I provide? Would you guys be against me providing a quick example of what I'm kind of look the things I'm thinking about?
Oh, I love real life examples.
Okay, so imagine if a doctor has, let's say, 100 patients that have high blood pressure. If he treats those 100 patients for high blood pressure, what percent do you think are actually controlled? Like, what percent of them is he able to like knock down to normal within normal values?
You mean where how many of them can he actually help? Is that what you're asking?
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. So like, how many of them are actually going to be like, okay, I went to the doctor, out of these 100 people, and X amount of them now have normal blood pressure?
40.
Okay, that's pretty close to the truth, actually. Yeah. So good guess. So like between 40 and 60% typically.
That's a very cynical guess on my part, by the way. I was
But it was
using
pretty
my
close.
cynical hat on.
Yeah, and you're pretty close to the truth. Yeah. So between 40 and 60%. And there was a company I worked for in Cincinnati that managed a group of doctors in the Dayton, Ohio area. They implemented at their offices some Lean Six Sigma things, and for the doctors to prevent inertia, they put the algorithm that's already in the doctor's head on paper. So they had like, if the patient comes in and have high blood pressure, have them go home, measure their blood pressure daily for 2 weeks, come back, check blood pressure again. If it's high, let's say, either you can recommend exercise and diet and so on. You can also start one of these 3 classes of medications. And then if they come back in 2 weeks, if it's still high, increase the dose. Come back in 2 weeks, if it's still high, start a second medication, so on. But basically prevent inertia. The doctors who followed this process religiously had over 90% control rate of high blood pressure.
They were able to help 90% of the patients who came.
Versus, right.
Wow. And the thing that made the difference was
a piece of paper for the most part. There was some other things involved, but in essence, it was a piece of paper. The same thing that they already know, but just in front of them on the table.
That's amazing. That's what made the difference.
I've talked with the doctors who were in this practice, and they're not super doctors. They're not like these heroes of whatever. They followed an algorithm, and literally, any doctor anywhere can do the same thing. When we talk about systems, right? So like, imagine if every mechanic does things differently, or every engineer does things differently. So let's say if they're tightening a bolt after an oil change, some of them turn it like too tight, some of them turn it maybe not tight enough. So so like when you have that much variability, you're going to have variable results. You're going to have oil leaks, or you're going to have strip bolts, and then oil just comes gushing out and things like that, right? So, but what if you have everyone, you teach them to tighten the bolt exactly to a certain, to much tighter spec? Then the results, then your outcomes increase, your costs go down because you don't have to repair all these other mistakes you just did, right? All these other things where you feel oil that it was leaking, whatever. Think about all the heart attacks and strokes and so on that were probably prevented because all of these other patients were now controlled on their blood pressure, right? People love to talk about healthcare things about lowering costs or increasing quality, et cetera. It's really simple things. There was technology involved in this, but there wasn't that much technology involved in this. It wasn't like you didn't need AI, you didn't need whatever. It was just like, it was for the most part pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I'm hearing it's easier to implement your systems and processes. What does that implementation process look like?
The main thing, again, is kind of just getting people on board, right? So the hardest thing for that company was to actually, because they managed this group of doctors, they were able to kind of talk with them over time and show them, hey, let's try this. And then not all the doctors in the practice actually bought into it. So there were some that didn't, and the results stayed about the same. There's doctors who kind of used that algorithm kind of like half the time, and the results were up slightly above the average, but not above 90%. What I've been fascinated by is actually, to your point, Lee, how do you actually implement this how do you scale it? I would say what I've found is by listening. People have a reason that they don't want to do something. Like you run into this all the time with your clients and stuff, right? Like you're trying to get a point across to them, and you're like, I keep telling them, I keep explaining, this is how you do it. And then they're like, I don't get it, or they just don't do it. And you're like, how do you, we talked about this. And then you explain again, you spend an hour explaining to them what needs to be done. And the more you explain, the less they're likely to actually do it. Or it seems that way sometimes. But that's how it works. If you explain things to them, to anyone, you're showing them your viewpoint, you're not listening to their viewpoint. Lee, let's say you're you were coaching me on something, and then I'm like, we meet every week. And then every time you're like, okay, Sam, did you implement what I said? Did you show gratitude to your coworkers? And I'm like, no, I didn't have time. I was busy, whatever. So instead of explaining to me okay, well, this is why it's important, you're like, Sam, seems like you had a good reason for not being able to do that. And then actually, yeah, thanks for asking. We've been struggling with these contracts, whatever. And, and then you can kind of keep probing, and I'll tell you whatever has been on my mind. And then you can see, okay, well, maybe this wasn't even the right time to for this specific like tool. Maybe he needs that there's something else that actually should have been like implemented first, whatever it is. But without listening to me, you have no idea what's going on in my head or like why I'm not following your instructions. And I don't know, I mean, obviously, this is a hypothetical. I'm sure your clients follow all your instructions. So
that's the thing. There's two things that come up. But I'm remembering system implementations, like system upgrades, conversions, or like absorbing companies, whatever it was, whatever the challenge was, the through line is always how people connecting with the humans and what's important to them and what they want out of it. Right? Whether it's like an accounting system, a sales system, right? A system in the hospital protocols, whatever it is, getting humans on board is what I'm hearing you talk about, right? Like it's not you dictating to them. They need to be bought in and they need to be connected and on board and share that vision of like, who gives a shit? Well, you do. Here's why. Here's why you do. Because this is important. Like, or why do you give a shit? What's important about that to you? Why are we here? Why are we here doing this protocol? Why are we trying to scale? What are we scaling?
Yeah, and so to your point, if you know, like if I tell you, Alina, this is important, what I'm telling you is that it's important to me.
Right.
It might not be important to you. Right.
Right.
So unless I learn what's important to you first, and then kind of show you why what we're doing is actually fits what your picture is, like you have no reason to really care about why it's. You're like, okay, great, you're my boss. Like, I don't care what's important to you. You're just there. You know, I'm just here to punch a clock. So like,
right, you're just a consultant. You're just coming and going. I'm the one who's here every day.
Right.
Right. I wonder if that's what kind of resistance. What's behind the resistance that you get?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know unless I ask, right? Really, the way to find out is mirror what the patient, what the person is saying, or to label it. So in terms of like, Michelle, it seems like this topic is very important to you. And then Michelle would tell me like, so I could be wrong. And she's like, no, this topic is not important to me at all. You know, but this is what's important to me. So she'll, because like we all want to, like we have a insatiable desire to correct people. So if I'm wrong in labeling Michelle's feelings or, you know, thoughts, she'll tell me like, no, this is what's important to me. This is what I'm really thinking. Or she'll be like, yeah, Sam, you're right. That is what I'm thinking. And here's more about kind of my internal thoughts. I was doing a consulting gig at a hospital in February. And I remember there was a doctor who was talking with a patient on the phone. The patient was at another hospital, and he or she, I don't remember, he or she wanted to be transferred to this hospital instead. The doctor kept telling the patient, no, look, and, you know, with a valid point, like we don't have the medicine here to help you. Like you're better at the other hospital because they can help you better than we can. And the patient was not hearing it. And so for an hour, they kind of shot back and forth, and the physician was very, you know, just frustrated that the patient wasn't hearing them, and they still wanted to come to this hospital, even though like it would be not beneficial to the patient. And the patient was probably frustrated because the physician wasn't hearing what they were saying, because so all the physician had to do was, instead of arguing, listen, it seems like you have a good reason for wanting to come here. You're an established patient here, and you value what we provide for you, and you know that you expect that the service here will be much better than at the other hospital. And the patient would be like, yeah, that's right. Like, you know, you guys have always taken good care of me. I want to come here because blah, blah. But now that they felt heard, the doctor can then say, you would come here even if we can't provide you with the best care. And the patient would be like, yes or no, whatever they want, right? But so the outcome might not necessarily change, but the feelings of the amount of frustration and like just back and forth, whatever, the amount of time it would take also would just be much less. But instead of wasting an hour, 5, 10, 15 minutes, and you'd have the same outcome, but like everyone feels happy. The patient feels heard. The physician's like, okay, I'm doing the best I can for the patient. They know that I can't, give them the kind of care that I value, that I expect to give my, that I can't provide them for them the level, the high level of care that I hold myself accountable to, but they're okay with that. So now when I hear conversations, I'm always like, okay, that could go way better if they just said this one thing.
If they just listened.
Yeah.
If they just asked.
But no one teaches us how to listen. That's the thing. It's not like we're right. Like no one literally. Unless I had read this book, like I would not have known how to listen.
That's what's it's amazing to me. I had a conversation with a friend who's a psychiatrist a couple of weeks ago, and I was asking this like something along these lines, like, do you learn how to manage a business? Do you learn how to actually speak to the patients? No, I mean, the focus is on healing people and making them better.
Right.
But what does better look like for them? And what do they want? Yeah. And the dirty question I haven't asked is, you have these protocols and you have these, like, this is how we do it, right? This is the standard protocol that everyone will follow. It will be uniform, therefore it will be scalable. How much does holistic, functional medicine, alternative medicine come into play? How is that viewed in that process of efficiency in the algorithm?
How much of what the doctors do is kind of rooted in outside methodologies of what they've learned, or?
Well, I guess variability from doctor to doctor, right? So some doctors may be more open to speaking from a patient experience. Some doctors may be more open to supplementing, augmenting, take more seriously, genuinely, not just like appeasing the patient. Like, oh yeah, let's try this alternative. Let's try it for a bit. Let's supplement it with traditional medicine. Let's see how they come together. How much variability do systems allow for that kind of change, that kind of shift? Does that make sense?
So kind of to individualize the approach to the patients, whatever deficiency they have might have in their diet or life or things like that. Currently, not much, because physicians don't have time for. And that's one of the things that we're kind of. That's why this approach kind of helps handle that. Physicians don't have time for individualized care so much. It's like they would love to do that. They just, they just don't have when they're 10, 15 minutes with the patient, they don't have the time to actually get into all that, especially when most patients that they see are, they have like 5, 10 or more problems. So they might have high blood pressure, they might have high cholesterol, diabetes, congestive heart failure, COPD, and so on and so forth, right? So like between all those things, there's not much time to actually to leave for like, hey, make sure you're getting enough magnesium or calcium or vitamin D or whatever it is, right? So yeah, so there's a lot to be desired, for that kind of individualized approach.
Yeah, I was curious, as I go out in the world and I meet people, as I come across people, who am I looking for that I can refer to you?
Well, it's a great question. Thank you. Really, people who want to make a change in healthcare, who want to help transform things, people who can introduce us to hospital executives where we can help them do what they've been trying to do and then deliver better, care and help make their employees' lives easier, and at the same time increasing quality of care, and change makers in healthcare, and also potential clients or people who can introduce us hopefully to potential clients. So I would say those would be probably the most valuable things.
Yeah, so a hospital executive who has maybe systems issues in running their operation?
Which is pretty much all of them. Yeah. I mean, there's very few hospitals that are, if any, that are, run so well that they don't have any issues.
Perfect. Love it, man. Love it. Well, I'm curious, my co-host or Sam, y'all have any last words before we start to wrap it up?
Well, thank you guys for one for having me on. This has been awesome, and I love the questions and being able to kind of share my thoughts with you guys. And it seems like you've experienced a lot of the things that we've talked about yourselves as well.
Michelle. Hi.
Hi.
Oh,
I have a lot of things I'm chewing on. I feel like I have one. I feel like if I want to put it all into a bundle, there's one thing I want to say, and it might not be popular opinion. I just feel like so often we forget there's a whole picture involved with regard to leadership and then with regard to those like underneath said leadership. And I think sometimes when we're the most frustrated, it's really hard to look at ourselves and say, how can we be a part of this? Or how are we a part of this? Or what can we do and how can we show up to offer the same compassion we want from our leaders to our leaders? And I feel like being an advocate for yourself and owning your life and understanding that we don't often know the whole picture. And I say that because I've been in situations where I started in one place and then grew to a different place where I had more of the whole picture. And I was like, well, that seemed like an asshole move, but it turns out there was moving parts and gears that I didn't know about that made that a requirement. It was actually the kindest thing they could have done, but they, because of confidentiality and a million other things, they couldn't do it. So I think it's always consider the possibility that while someone might be appearing to be an asshole, sometimes it's actually the most compassionate thing they can do. And that's just me coming from a place of, I started my journey in absolute victimhood and looking for all the ways to point fingers to someone else. And I've worked really hard to understand that there's always more to the picture and you only know your own world and you don't know the rest. And I think the more compassion we can have in the world as leaders, as followers, as charged trailblazers, as all of it might be just the most key piece to remind ourselves that it's okay to stand up for ourselves, remind ourselves that we don't always know and to consider the possibility that there's always more to the picture. I don't know. That's where I land with it all.
Doesn't seem very controversial. I'm with you on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel grateful. First of all, thank you for coming on. And I'm grateful that your mission and you exist and that you do what you do and that you challenge the status quo, because these are real humans, life and death, quality of life, impact. And it's fantastic and so much of it needed. The good news is there's a tremendous market. There's no shortage. The good news, Sam, for better or worse, my prediction, if I have a crystal ball, is you are not running out of people who need you, of hospitals that need you. And I'm grateful that you do what you do for your mission, whether it is the company that you run now, the advisory roles, all the things that you're involved in that are all have that same through line of serving better. So thank you.
It's a $5 trillion problem. Imagine if we were able to just by implementing simple solutions like just like things from this book, like the Hospital and Clinic Improvement Handbook, which uses both like Lean Six Sigma and theory of constraints, we could probably cut that by a third.
Amazing.
So anyway, yeah, it's but no, thank you. Yeah, that's very kind, and yeah, you helped me crystallize some things, and I like the way you guys put things. It's and Michelle, I appreciate the reminder that yeah, it's we have to give everyone grace and like compassion, because like we have no idea what the other person's going through, regardless of their role, and it's easy to play the blame game, but it's harder to actually take the time and actually do things like and do them right. That was my takeaway from what you said. You correct me if I'm wrong.
I think it's yeah. And just to really show up for yourself. So many of us forget to do that. There's so much what you talked about people being overworked and, not having the time. And it's like, oh gosh, what if we all plugged in more often? What does that change the time that we do have? And is it more productive then? I don't know. I just think it's cool. I appreciate the conversation today.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Sam, we really appreciate having you on. And with that, I'm going to hit the button.
Hit the
Sounds good,
button.
cool. Money we earn. Oh,
Don't mind me.
okay. Taking the proceeds from our businesses and really investing that into purchasing hospitals, especially in rural, like small rural hospitals, because the small rural hospitals are the ones that are most at danger of kind of going under. And when they do, that community is kind of like screwed because they don't have, now they have to drive another 40 minutes, an hour and a half to the next place. And imagine if, you're either giving birth or if you were injured in a, like a farm machine accident or something like that, an hour or having a heart attack, let's say, like an hour is a long time to go like get somewhere else. One of the cool things actually that Dr. Clapp said yesterday to me was that the benchmark typically is like, hey, well, this rural hospital doesn't provide the same quality of care, let's say, for a heart attack, let's say, than this like, academic medical center that's an hour and a half away. Well, okay, right, but it's never going to. They're not going to have the same kind of volume, right? Patients to kind of really train on, or not train, but to really to have the same amount of reps, basically. But you're not. The standard isn't like one versus the other. Standard is, okay, well, what happens if there's no care over there? Is the hospital providing better care than if there were no care, right? The answer to that is most likely yes, right? Yeah, so that our major goal is to really help rural communities thrive and keep those hospitals operating, and also do so by making them like the top hospitals, like in the region, if not the country.
No big deal. Just saving lives.
Yeah.
If someone else was doing it, then I would be glad not to, right? I mean, it's more of like kind of like a necessity thing when, like, why not? If it needs to be done, just, okay, let's just do it. And granted, it's a lot easier said than done, as I've realized over the past 12 years. but I think we're getting closer. So, but yeah, thank you guys.
The
You got it.
big mission.
Gotta start somewhere, I guess, right? So, but yeah, what can I do to help you guys?
You already did.
Just be you.
Thank you for listening to That's a Great Point with Elena Doran, Michelle Albers, and Lee Smart. To find out more about how we can serve you, check out our links in the show description. Thanks for playing along.